It started as an ordinary night out, a few drinks at a local bar to unwind after a long week. But for Sergeant Alex Turner, what began as a typical Friday night quickly spiraled into a nightmare that would change his life forever. Sitting at the bar, Alex was minding his own business, lost in thought, when a group of bikers walked in. The loud rumble of their engines echoed in the air, their leather jackets and patched vests an immediate signal of their affiliation with a notorious motorcycle gang. The room grew tense as they made their way to the bar, their eyes locking on Alex as if he were a target. At first, it seemed harmless. They made a few jokes, roughhousing with the bartender and laughing at the music. But it didn't take long for the atmosphere to shift. One biker, the leader of the group, slid onto the stool next to Alex and made a remark about the military. "Is it true that the army lets anyone in now? Even you?" he sneered, eyes full of venom. Alex, ever the professional, remained calm. He knew how to handle tension, he had been trained for it. But this wasn't just an insult about his service. This was something much deeper. The biker's words cut deeper, echoing with racial undertones that Alex couldn't ignore. "Excuse me?" Alex asked, his voice steady but his fists clenched under the bar. The biker didn't back down. Instead, he leaned in closer, the stench of alcohol on his breath, his eyes narrowing with malice. "You heard me, soldier. What are you doing in here?" "This isn't your kind of place," the biker growled, his fingers drumming on the counter. Alex's mind raced. The room felt smaller. He had been in dangerous situations before, but this felt different. This wasn't a confrontation over orders or discipline, it was personal. And Alex had a feeling it was just the beginning. The tension in the bar grew thick as the other bikers gathered around, all eyes on Alex. The leader, sensing the moment, took things further. "You don't belong here, man. Why don't you just leave before things get ugly?" Alex stood up, his instincts kicking in. He wasn't about to back down. But just as he opened his mouth to respond, another biker, a massive man, easily 6'4", lunged at him, pushing him backward with a force that sent him stumbling. The bar was silent for a heartbeat. Then, as if on cue, the leader pulled something from his pocket, a knife. The gleaming blade reflected the dim light of the bar. "Leave now. Before I have to make you," the leader hissed, his grin widening as he saw the fear in Alex's eyes. But Alex wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He pulled his phone from his pocket with lightning speed, tapping out a message before anyone could stop him. His hands were steady, his training kicking in. He wasn't alone. He had a crew. Within moments, the bar's atmosphere shifted again, this time to one of uncertainty. The bikers, sensing the sudden change, looked around. It was then they noticed the shadow of Alex's military training. The serious look in his eyes, the calmness of his movements. Before the bikers could react, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, and suddenly, the door to the bar swung open. 3 military men, dressed in civilian clothes but unmistakably ex-army, walked in like a storm, their presence commanding attention. They were Alex's crew, men who had his back no matter what. And they weren't just here for a drink. The leader of the bikers turned pale as the group approached. "What's this? You bring the army here now, soldier?" he spat, trying to sound tough but his voice betraying his fear. Alex didn't flinch. "You crossed the line, pal," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Now you're going to regret it." The bikers, realizing they were outnumbered and outclassed, made a snap decision. The leader grabbed the knife, aiming it at Alex, but before he could make his move, one of Alex's crew stepped forward, disarming him in a single fluid motion. The biker staggered back, the knife falling to the floor with a clatter. In that instant, the bikers realized the stakes had shifted. This wasn't just a bar fight anymore. This was a battle between two worlds, the world of violent, prejudiced bikers and the world of trained, disciplined soldiers who had seen things far worse than this. But just as the situation seemed to be calming down, the real twist came, the kind that no one saw coming. The door swung open again. A figure stepped in, tall and imposing. He had the look of someone used to power, someone who commanded respect without uttering a word. And he had one goal, to ensure the bikers paid for their actions. But who was this man? And how did he know exactly when to show up? As the tension hung in the air, Alex exchanged a quick glance with his crew. They all knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And then the unthinkable happened. The figure at the door spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "This isn't just a bar fight. This is a message," he said. "And if you think this is the worst thing that's going to happen tonight, you're sorely mistaken." The scene was about to explode once more. What would happen when the bikers faced a new, unpredictable threat? And what role did this mysterious figure play in it all? The figure at the door didn't budge. His presence seemed to freeze the room in place, and for a split second, it felt like time itself had stopped. The bikers, still stunned by the confrontation, exchanged nervous glances, but no one made a move. Alex stood tall, his eyes locked on the stranger. He recognized the man instantly, a former commanding officer, General Marcus Hayes, who had retired under mysterious circumstances years ago. Hayes wasn't someone you forgot easily. He had a reputation for his no-nonsense approach, and his methods had left many wondering just how far he'd go to right a wrong. Alex had worked under him once, and in a way, they both shared a bond forged in combat. But Hayes was known for taking justice into his own hands. The tension was unbearable. The bikers, now realizing the full weight of what they were up against, looked between Alex and Hayes, clearly out of their depth. "You think this is over?" Hayes's voice cut through the silence, colder than the knife that had just been dropped. "You don't get to just walk away from what you started." The leader of the bikers, who had been trying to muster courage, now hesitated. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he snarled, his face contorted with rage, but there was a quiver of fear in his voice. Hayes didn't answer. He simply walked toward the group, his eyes never leaving the bikers. Alex's crew flanked him on either side, forming an unbreakable wall between the bikers and the exit. There was no escape now. The leader tried to make a move, but it was too late. Hayes, with the swiftness of someone who had been trained in the harshest conditions, grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. The other bikers froze, too stunned to intervene. "Let's talk about the message you're trying to send here," Hayes growled, his grip tightening. The leader's face turned pale, his eyes bulging as he struggled for air. "You think terrorizing people, harassing soldiers, my soldiers, makes you some kind of big shot? Think again." Alex's mind was racing. He knew Hayes wasn't just here for revenge, there was something bigger at play. Hayes had been keeping an eye on the bikers for months, waiting for the right moment to strike back. And now, it seemed like everything was coming to a head. "Let him go," Alex finally spoke, his voice firm. Hayes turned to look at him, his face still cold, but he nodded and released the biker. The man crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. With one swift motion, Hayes turned back to the bikers, his eyes scanning them with an intensity that sent chills down their spines. "You've made a mistake tonight, but I'm going to make sure it's the last mistake you ever make." As the bikers backed up, Hayes stepped aside, allowing Alex to take the lead. The room was still filled with tension, but the bikers now knew the game had changed. One of the bikers, a younger man who seemed less involved in the confrontation, took a step forward. "Look, we didn't mean no harm. We were just having fun. Let's just forget about it, all right?" Alex shook his head. "No. You don't get to just walk away from what you started. You've crossed a line. And now, you're going to face the consequences." Hayes, who had been silently watching, nodded in agreement. "You think this is just about a bar fight? It's not. This is about respect. This is about standing up for what's right, no matter who you are. And tonight, you've learned that lesson the hard way." But just as the bikers seemed to realize the gravity of their situation, one of them reached for something hidden under his jacket, a gun. The room exploded into chaos as the gunshot rang out, echoing across the bar. Time seemed to slow down. In the blink of an eye, Alex moved. His military training kicked in, and he was on top of the gunman in a heartbeat. He twisted the man's arm, sending the gun flying across the room, before forcing him to the ground in a swift, controlled takedown. The bikers scrambled, some rushing toward the door, others retreating into corners. But the bar was now a battlefield, and there was nowhere for them to run. Hayes stood tall, his hand resting on the back of a chair, watching the chaos unfold. "This isn't the end. This is just the beginning. These men will face justice, and it won't be from the law. It'll be from those they've wronged. As the last of the bikers were either restrained or dragged outside by the military crew, Alex stood up, his breath heavy but controlled. His phone buzzed in his pocket, another message from an anonymous source. It was a warning. The bikers weren't the only threat he'd be facing. Someone much more dangerous was coming, someone who had orchestrated this whole thing from the shadows. A chill ran down his spine. This wasn't just about one bar fight anymore. There were bigger forces at play. With the bikers gone and the bar now eerily quiet, Alex and his crew exchanged wary glances. Hayes stepped forward, placing a hand on Alex's shoulder. "You did good tonight, soldier," Hayes said. "But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." As the sirens faded into the distance, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was just beginning. And whatever came next, it was going to be much worse than he could have ever imagined. The game had changed. The stakes had risen. And now it was a fight for survival, not just for Alex, but for everyone who had ever been a target. The bikers had just been the first wave. And the real enemy was still out there. Thin, for now.